As many people will know, the case against Lucy Letby relied solely on circumstantial evidence. However, in this video we'll be taking a look at what most people believe to be the strongest and most damning evidence against Lucy Letby, and that comes in the form of the cases of child F and child L. This is a video regarding the intentional insulin poisonings. The prosecution alleged child F was given insulin via a nutrition bag on August 4th to 5th, and that the next bag hung up on noon on August 5th, a stock bag from the fridge, had a similar amount of insulin put in it. The jury is reminded of the relationship between insulin and insulin C-peptide levels naturally occurring in the body, and the relationship between those two in synthetic insulin. A new TPN fluid nutrition bag was hung up at 12:25 am on August 5th for child F. Yvonne Griffiths said the fridge contains stock bags and insulin. That fridge was kept locked with one set of keys, initially in the hands of the shift leader, but available on request. There was no system for signing the keys in or out. Child F was the only baby on that night shift of August 4th to 5th who was receiving TPN. Professor Peter Hindmarsh says the bag administered at 12:25 am had insulin in. Dr. Harkness attended the unit that night and noted child F had vomits and was tachycardic with a heart rate of 200 beats per minute, but otherwise well. Professor Hindmarsh said these were signs of hypoglycemia. Doses of dextrose and salt water were administered. Kate Bissell and Band 4 nurses said they had never added anything to a TPN bag. Dr. Gibbs said the fall in child F's blood sugar level was unexpected. At 10:30 am, a new long line was to be inserted in child F as instructed by Dr. Solardi, with the removal of the old one. The fluids were stopped while the line was replaced and child F's blood sugar level rose. A new TPN bag from the stock bags in the fridge, of which there are about 5, was hung up at noon and fluids resumed. Child F's blood sugar levels remained low in the afternoon after dextrose boluses at 3 pm and 5 pm. The TPN bag was stopped at 7 pm. The judge details how the insulin blood sample was taken to the laboratory in Liverpool and analysed, and the results came back showing an undetectable level of insulin C-peptide compared to a high level of insulin. It was suggested that the sample be referred for further tests, but child F had recovered by this stage, so the sample was stored for 7 days before being disposed of. Professor Hindmarsh said the increased blood sugar readings for child F during the afternoon were consistent with them following fresh bolus administrations of dextrose. The blood glucose had started to rise spontaneously between 10:30 to noon, Professor Hindmarsh said, during the time the fluids were not being administered. He said the dangers of low blood sugar include confusion, seizures, brain damage and, in serious cases, death. The judge says the court has heard the most likely cause of insulin administration was for it to be administered intravenously. Professor Hindmarsh says the most likely way for this was via an infusion at a rate of 1.2 units per hour, and calculated that 0.6 ml of insulin, a clear fluid, was added. He says the same amount would have been needed to have been added to the stock bag. He concluded that the only explanation was for child F to have received bags contaminated with insulin. Dr. Evans concluded child F had received insulin via the TPN bag. Dr. Bowen agreed and said 2 bags must have been contaminated with insulin. When interviewed, Letby remembered child F as the surviving twin of child E. She agreed her signature was for a TPN bag and could not remember if she had administered the TPN or not. The bags were kept at the top of the fridge, the insulin at the bottom. Letby said medication would not be added to a TPN bag. She agreed the blood sugar level for child F at 1:54 am was, quote, dangerously low, and denied harming child F or giving him any insulin. Letby, in evidence, said she believed her nursing colleague had hung up the TPN bag. She confirmed she did not know about C-peptide at that time. She knew adding insulin was life-threatening to a child like child F. She said Facebook searches for the parents was because the twins were on her mind. Mr. Johnson moves on to the case of child F, the first of the two babies the prosecution say Letby poisoned with insulin. Child L is the other child allegedly poisoned by Letby. Mr. Johnson previously told the court the cases of child F and L would be part of the cross-examination process together. Letby accepts the insulin readings which were shown for child F, the insulin and insulin C-peptide numbers. The jury have heard the blood sample showed an extremely high level of insulin and a very low C-peptide level in child F, which a medical expert said only had one explanation, that being that the child received insulin from some outside source. Letby tells Mr. Johnson that she accepts the insulin and C-peptide levels detected in the blood of child F. Mr. Johnson asks if Miss Letby agrees that someone targeted child F and injected insulin into his feed bag. She says, quote, she can't answer that, but says, I accept that he was given insulin at some point, yes. The nursing staff rota for August 4th to 5th is shown to the court. Child F is in room 2 with Letby's colleague, the designated nurse. Letby was designated nurse for another baby. Letby says she cannot say how the insulin got in child F, so, quote, I don't think I can answer if staffing levels played a part in the poisoning of child F. Mr. Johnson says Letby was very keen to ask police about the TPN bag said to have had insulin in it. Letby replies, because I was being accused of placing insulin in the bag. I thought someone would have checked the fluids. I wanted them to check the bag, yes. I thought it would have been standard practice on the unit. Mr. Johnson says Letby had not been questioned about child F and child L in 2018, but was questioned about it in the following interviews. In it, Letby asked police about the nutrition bag said to have had insulin in. Nicholas Johnson: you knew very well the bags wouldn't have been kept, didn't you? Letby replies, no. Letby had said to police if there had been concerns over the bags, they would have been kept. Nicholas Johnson: you knew no concern had been expressed, didn't you? Letby replies, I didn't know no concern had been expressed at the time of this interview, no. Police had asked why Letby had asked about the nutrition bags. Letby had said to police there may, quote, have been an issue with something else. Letby tells the court the issue may have been insulin coming from outside the unit. She says at that point it was not known where the insulin had come from, and it was not known if it was in the bags. Letby says she does not recall there were concerns for child F's blood sugar level in her police interview in 2019. Mr. Johnson, however, says she was aware of it at the time. Text messages are shown to the court with Letby messaging a colleague about a low blood sugar reading. Nicholas Johnson: had you seen something like this before? Babies having loads of dextrose and still having low blood sugars? Letby replies, yes. Nicholas Johnson: you were trying to place it as natural causes. Letby replies, I don't think I was trying to provide an explanation. Letby's message is shown to the court. Wonder if he has an endocrine problem then? Mr. Johnson asks, does that mean natural causes? Letby replies, yes. Mr. Johnson asks about the security of nutrition bags in the fridge under lock and key. He says they are not safe from someone with a key who can inject a tiny amount of insulin into the bag. Letby replies, the bags are sealed and you would have to break the seal to do that. Mr. Johnson asks if that would prevent someone from the previous shift from inserting insulin into the bag. Letby replies, I can't say that as I wouldn't put insulin into a TPN bag. Mr. Johnson says the prescribed bag must have been tampered with between 4 p.m. on August the 4th and 1 a.m. on August 5th. The replacement bag was a generic one. Mr. Johnson describes how the insulin could be administered after the bag has been delivered to the ward. One method is after the cellophane wrap has been removed, to which he says that would mean there would be very few candidates who could have done that. Nicholas Johnson: why would you not put insulin into bags? Letby: because that would go against all standard practice. It is highly dangerous. Letby replies, yes. Life-threatening to a child. Letby replies, yes. Something that would never cross the minds of medical staff. Lucy Letby: at the time, no. Letby says she cannot answer if child F was deliberately poisoned, as she does not know how the insulin got there, who was there, or why. Mr. Johnson asks about the Facebook searches for child E and F's mother carried out in the months after August 4th, 2015. Letby says she got on well with the mother at the time, that she thought about child E often and wanted to see how child F was doing. The judge refers to the case of child L and child M and their birth on April 8, 2016 at the Countess of Chester Hospital. The judge says it is alleged Letby tried to kill child L by putting insulin into bags of dextrose. Professor Hindmarsh said the hypoglycemia episode for child L lasted from April 9th to 11th and multiple bags had insulin added. He said a quote, not noticeable amount of insulin, 0.1 ml, would have been added to the 500 ml bag, which would not change the colour. He was of the opinion that 2 or 3 bags, depending on how many bags were hung, had insulin added. He said while sticky insulin would account for some of the hypoglycemia, over time more insulin would have had to have been added via a bag. Letby worked 4 long day shifts from April 6th to 9th and had moved house during that time to Westbourne Road, Chester. She said April 9th was still fairly busy on the unit. After birth on April 8th, child L's blood sugar was a bit low at 1.9. The court had heard this was normal for premature babies, so he was started on glucose. Reference to hypoglycemic pathway was mentioned, that milk should be given to infants before an infusion of glucose. Neonatal practitioner Amy Davies said she had no concerns for child L regarding putting him on an alternative pathway. Dr. Bomick wrote the rate of the glucose infusion. Letby said glucose bags were kept in room 1 and insulin was kept in the equipment room. She could not recall if any of the bags were kept under lock and key. The first bag was 10% dextrose at noon on April 8th. Colleague Amy Davies denied administering insulin, saying that would only be given to babies with a blood sugar level over 12 and would only be prescribed by a doctor. This was the 60th case Dr. Evans looked at, the court is told. He saw the relation between insulin and insulin C-peptide in the blood plasma laboratory result for child L. He suggested to police a specialist should be approached to review his findings. Professor Hindmarsh said neonates have higher glucose requirements and any blood sugar level under 2.4 to 2.6 is a cause for concern, so it was appropriate for the initial dextrose infusion. For the night of April 8th to 9th, there were no concerns for child L, and all the blood glucose readings were above 2. No fluid bags were changed during the night shift. For the day shift of April 9th, Mary Griffiths was the designated nurse for child L. She said he was stable. Professor Hindmarsh says child L was hypoglycemic by 10 AM on April 9th, and insulin must have been added between midnight and 9:30 AM. He said it is fairly easy to insert insulin into the portal of the bag via a needle. The judge says Professor Hindmarsh said at least 3 bags contained insulin to maintain the low blood sugar levels for child L. The insulin could have been added to the bags at the same time, he added. He said once it was in the bag, it would not be known by smell or appearance. The type of insulin used was fast-acting, the court was told. Mary Griffiths said it was quite a shock. The blood glucose levels for child L dropped after the dextrose was administered. Letby said in evidence she had nothing to do with insulin in the bags and could not assist with an explanation why the blood sugar level was so low. She said she had nothing to do with the bags prior to changing them. Mary Griffiths could not recall if the bag was changed. A plasma blood sample was taken, but podding was late, the court had heard, due to the collapse of child L's twin, child M. The evidence, the judge says, is the blood sample was taken between noon when child L had a 1.6 blood sugar reading and 3:35 PM. The blood sample passed all the quality control tests and performance checks at the Royal Liverpool Hospital. The judge tells the jury, in short, there is no evidence to doubt the reliability of the test results. The insulin and the insulin C-peptide results were the wrong way around from what they should have been. Child L's insulin level of 1099 should have meant an insulin C-peptide of 5 to 10,000, but it was 264. The court had heard said it was therefore synthetic insulin that was administered, and to do so was dangerous. Clinical biochemist Dr. Anna Milan said there wasn't anything that doubted the accuracy of the results. In cross-examination, she explained in the case of insulin, if the sample had not been treated appropriately, the insulin level would have been even higher, and insulin C-peptide was stable. Professor Hindmarsh said the 1099 reading was a minimum, not a maximum. Letby in interview said the original blood sugar levels for child L were not a huge surprise for a neonate. She said very prolonged low blood sugar levels can cause brain damage and even death. She said it was not common for babies to be given insulin. She said they had access to the hypoglycemia pathway on the unit. She said any addition to an infusion bag would be very rare and have to be prescribed by a doctor and would have to be administered via syringe on the bag port. She replied, "That wasn't done by me," to the accusation the bags had been sabotaged. She said an explanation would be that insulin would be in one of the bags and denied responsibility. The prosecution say there is uncontrovertible evidence child L was poisoned with insulin before 10 AM on April 9th and accounted for persistent low blood sugar levels. They say this happened when Letby was on shift. Blood sugar levels improved on April 11th. The prosecution says from the second 15% dextrose bag on that day, child L was no longer being infused with insulin. Letby said the initial low blood sugar levels for child L on April 8th showed naturally resolving hypoglycemia. She accepted only she and Belinda Simcock had been on duty for the child F and child L events when the babies first had serious low blood sugar readings. She denied doing anything to harm child L. Mr. Johnson moves to the second insulin case for child L, who was a twin to child M. Letby's defence statement said she had done nothing wrong and had not deliberately harmed either twin. Letby said in her defence statement the unit was exceptionally busy on April 9, 2016, the day after child L and child M had been born. Letby said at the time she could not understand child L's insulin levels and could not understand why there was not an investigation done at the time. Letby denies using the hypoglycemic pathway not being followed as an opportunity to attack child L. Letby says she accepts someone put insulin into the dextrose solution for child L and accepts there would be no reason for doing this and it would be, quote, highly dangerous. Letby accepts the blood results prove insulin was placed in the dextrose solution. Professor Hindmarsh had previously given evidence to say insulin had been administered between midnight and 9:30 AM on April 9th. Nicholas Johnson, do you accept that? Letby replies, yes. Mr. Johnson says the insulin administered to child L was a, quote, targeted attack, as the dextrose bag had been in place since noon on April 8th. Quote, it follows that insulin was administered while the dextrose bag was hanging, doesn't it? Letby responds, I don't know. Mr. Johnson talked through the process and repeats that, from evidence, the bag must have been in place when insulin was administered. Letby replies, if that's what the expert suggests, yes. Nicholas Johnson, it follows that it was a targeted attack. Letby replies, I can't answer that. Mr. Johnson says the only two staff members on duty for both days when child F and child L were poisoned with insulin were Letby and Belinda Simcock. A staffing rota for the April 9th day shift is shown to the court. Child L and child M are in room 1 with designated nurse Mary Griffith. Letby is designated nurse for 2 other babies in room 1. Belinda Simcock is the designated nurse for 3 babies in room 3. 4 babies are in room 2 and 4 babies are in room 4. The neonatal schedule for April 9th is shown. Mr. Johnson says it is to show what Lucy Letby was doing between 9 and 9:30 AM. The schedule shows Letby was a co-signer for medication for 1 baby in room 2 and giving a feed to her designated baby in room 1. Letby was the co-signer for medication for a room 1 designated baby at around 9:10 AM. Mr. Johnson says a series of prescriptions for 3 different babies at 9:25 to 9:20 AM, co-signed by a nursery nurse and Mary Griffith, gave Letby the opportunity to administer the insulin for child L. Letby replies, no, I don't know how the insulin got there. Mr. Johnson says it has already been established that insulin was administered on the unit on the bag that was connected to child L throughout that time. Nicholas Johnson: This was a targeted attack, wasn't it? Letby pauses. What do you say? Letby replies, Not by me it wasn't. Letby says she can only answer for herself in relation to the accusation by Mr. Johnson that the insulin poisoning for child F and child L can only be you or Belinda Simcock. Mr. Johnson says despite the fact the bag was changed at noon on April 9th, the insulin kept being administered to child L. Letby replies, Yes. Mr. Johnson says we know that because the blood sample taken to the lab was taken at 3:45 p.m. and contained insulin. Letby replies, I can't recall. Mr. Johnson says child L was targeted with a second bag of insulin. Letby responds, I'd have to be guided by the evidence, the expert evidence. Mr. Johnson says a third bag is hung up at 4:30 p.m. The hypoglycemia continued, and Letby agrees. The fourth bag, hung up the following day, when you, Letby, were not working, was put up, and the hypoglycemia gradually resolved. Letby agrees. Mr. Johnson says the reason for the hypoglycemia was that someone had poisoned child L through at least 2 bags of insulin. Letby responds, Yes. Nicholas Johnson: And that was you, wasn't it? Letby replies, No.